Hello everyone, those preparing to immigrate to the United States, or who have relatives residing in Jamaica, must carefully read the following information. A major US immigration policy that has recently been introduced has dashed the hopes of countless Jamaicans dreaming of the American dream. This has plunged many families yearning for reunification into unprecedented fear and confusion. On Wednesday, US authorities officially announced that Jamaica had been added to a blacklist of 75 countries subject to immigration restrictions. Starting next week, all processing of immigration visas for these countries will be suspended. This news has sent shockwaves through Jamaica's immigrant community, turning a once promising path to the US into an uncertain and dimly lit journey. Many people may not yet grasp the full implications of this policy. Let me clarify its core elements. This suspension of immigration visas is not a routine policy change. It is a significant move in the Trump administration's efforts to tighten immigration policies. The targeting is unmistakable. It specifically aims at immigrants from countries deemed likely to become a significant burden on the US welfare system. The scope is exceptionally broad. All related processes are now completely blocked. Whether it's individuals seeking family reunification through spousal sponsorship, elderly parents hoping to join their children already settled in the US, or applicants who have secured permanent job offers and are awaiting final visa approval. For these individuals, the dreams of obtaining a green card that they have pursued for months or even years have been dealt a devastating blow by the implementation of this policy. All prior preparations and efforts have temporarily lost their clear direction. It is crucial to grasp the following key points, as each one may directly impact your personal interests or those of your loved ones. Firstly, consider the policy's effective date and scope. The indefinite visa suspension order takes effect on the 21st of January 2026 and covers a total of 75 countries. Of these, 12 are Caribbean nations, as well as Jamaica. This includes Antigua and Barbuda, Barbados, Belize, Cuba, Dominica, Grenada, Haiti, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. This policy adjustment therefore covers almost all major Caribbean nations, demonstrating its extensive scope of impact. The US Department of State has issued a series of tweets on X, formerly Twitter, providing an official interpretation of this suspension order. The statement explicitly targets countries whose immigrant populations exhibit welfare dependency rates exceeding reasonable thresholds. Regarding the duration of the policy, the official statement indicates that it will remain in effect until the US government can ensure that newly arriving immigrants will not encroach upon the existing wealth resources of American citizens. Another official statement was more forthright, explicitly emphasizing that the Trump administration will always prioritize the interests of the United States above all else. These statements reveal the hardline stance of the current US administration on immigration policy, where all decisions are guided by domestic interests, and the legitimate rights of immigrant communities in other countries are disregarded, as are the family reunification aspirations of countless families. Regarding the chain reaction triggered by this policy adjustment, professionals in relevant fields have offered clear predictions. Irving Clare, Executive Director of Caribbean Immigration Services in New York, bluntly stated in a media interview that this suspension order will inevitably plunge numerous families into survival crises. He acknowledged that immigrant communities' reliance on social welfare programs is an objective reality that cannot be ignored. However, he emphasized that the essence of this policy change is a restriction on the right to family reunification in disguise. Anyone who has been following developments in US immigration policy knows that, since taking office, this administration has consistently sought to undermine the central role of family reunification mechanisms within the US immigration system. The visa suspension order targeting 75 countries is just another example of this policy in action. Here, I must emphasize a crucial distinction between two easily confused concepts: immigrant visas and non-immigrant visas. Many people mistakenly believe that all visa applications to the United States have been suspended, but this is not the case. This policy specifically targets immigrant visas. The application and approval processes for non-immigrant visas remain unaffected. To clarify, immigrant visas are intended for individuals who are planning to settle permanently in the United States and ultimately obtain US permanent residency, i.e. a green card. Non-immigrant visas, however, are for those traveling to the US temporarily, such as tourists, students pursuing higher education, or short-term workers who are expected to return to their home countries after their visit ends. Therefore, if you are only planning a temporary visit to the US, you need not worry about the impact of this policy Only those seeking permanent residency through immigration applications will be directly affected by this suspension order. However, Jamaicans who have already submitted immigration applications are anxious about the phrase indefinite suspension. Many have submitted complete application materials through relatives in the US or directly to US immigration authorities, and are awaiting visa approval to reunite with family. Now, having suddenly received notice of an indefinite suspension, they have no way of predicting how long their applications will be put on hold, or even if they will be approved. Faced with this situation, many are asking, can the Jamaican government intervene? The answer is clear. This falls under US domestic policy. As a sovereign nation, Jamaica cannot demand that the US alter its established policies. That said, the Jamaican government is not standing idly by entirely. Foreign Minister Kamina Johnson-Smith has issued a statement on social media confirming that she is engaging with the relevant US agencies to verify and clarify the details of this specific policy. She has pledged to share updates with Jamaican citizens promptly once concrete information is obtained. Although no substantive breakthrough has yet been achieved, this initiative offers a glimmer of hope to the anxious Jamaican immigrant community. Beyond governmental responses, immigration attorneys in the US have offered professional insights. In an interview, Xavier Francis, an immigration lawyer, stated that the current situation essentially amounts to a waiting game for applicants. He emphasized that, under the existing policy framework, applicants cannot take any proactive measures to expedite their applications. The only option is to wait patiently. He further explained that if an applicant's visa quota had been approved before the suspension took effect, they would have been able to submit their green card application through consular channels. However, this process is now completely frozen and cannot resume until the suspension is lifted. This means that even applicants whose immigration processes had advanced to the final stages are now forced to halt and wait, with no way of knowing how long this will take. For Jamaicans who have long resided in Jamaica and were looking forward to reuniting with relatives in the United States, this policy change is undoubtedly devastating. Many Jamaican citizens interviewed said that they had pursued the American dream as their life goal for years, preparing to immigrate to the United States. Some had been separated from their American family members for over a decade, eagerly awaiting visa approval to reunite. Learning that the process has been suspended indefinitely has created an overwhelming sense of despair, as their hopeful expectations have been shattered. However, one exception must be clarified. If an applicant marries a US citizen while in the United States, and the immigration petition is filed from within the country, the application process can proceed as normal, and is unaffected by the suspension. This exception is primarily due to the fact that such petitions originate within the United States, which differs fundamentally from petitions initiated by relatives in Jamaica, in terms of processing regulations and jurisdictional authority. Consequently, those primarily affected by this policy are individuals residing long-term in Jamaica whose immigration applications were initiated overseas by US relatives. Their path to immigration now faces substantial additional hurdles. Adding to the anxiety, although the court immigration approval procedures have not been formally cancelled, they have effectively ground to a complete halt. No official agency can provide a clear timeline for progress, nor can anyone predict future policy changes. For families awaiting reunification, the greatest fear is not the immediate rejection of their applications, but this drawn-out, indefinite wait, the uncertainty of whether their applications will be permanently shelved, and whether family reunification will remain possible. The mental anguish caused by this uncertainty is far more painful than a clear rejection. In fact, the impact extends beyond the Jamaican immigrant community. This policy adjustment has also taken many US citizens by surprise. Currently, US Citizenship and Immigration Services (USCIS) still has a large number of immigration cases. From these 75 countries under review, these cases involve countless American families whose overseas relatives are awaiting visa approval. The sudden announcement of an indefinite suspension has plunged both US-based relatives and overseas applicants into deep anxiety, leaving them unable to predict the outcome of their cases. Many people may not realize that this suspension of immigrant visas for 75 countries is not the first instance of the Trump administration tightening immigration policies. As early as the 4th of January 2026, Trump released a list of 120 countries whose citizens ranked among the highest recipients of US welfare benefits, according to statistics published at the time. While only 1% of US households received welfare benefits, Jamaica's rate was much higher at 367%. A key factor in its inclusion on the suspension list, Notably, several other countries on that list, including Haiti, Cuba, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and Trinidad and Tobago, had higher welfare recipient rates than Jamaica. This explains why these countries have also been included in the current visa suspension for Jamaicans who have long aspired to immigrate to the United States. It must be acknowledged that this is an extremely turbulent period. As a sovereign nation, the United States undoubtedly has the right to formulate its own immigration policies and related regulations. However, for ordinary citizens who merely seek family reunification and aspire to create a better life for themselves in America through their own efforts, this policy adjustment is undeniably cruel. After all, they are not motivated by the desire to seize wealth, but rather to reunite with loved ones and gain access to broader development opportunities. Many Jamaican citizens interviewed recognized the US's right to have its own regulatory framework and expressed their willingness to comply with relevant regulations, yet they hope that when formulating policies, the US government will give greater consideration to the familial bonds of ordinary people, rather than disregarding the dreams of countless families who want to reunite in pursuit of profit. First, some also indicated that, given the increasingly stringent US immigration policies, they might abandon their plans to immigrate to America and instead focus on countries with more lenient policies that place greater emphasis on family reunification. Viewers may now have their own perspectives. Some might argue that it is entirely reasonable for the US government to prioritize domestic interests, while others may feel that such a one-size-fits-all policy is overly extreme and causes emotional harm to countless ordinary families. Regardless of one's stance, the suspension of visas for 75 countries has undeniably had a tangible impact on countless Jamaican families and plunged the entire Caribbean immigrant community into uncertainty. Next, let's delve deeper into the underlying motivations behind this policy adjustment. The Trump administration's intense focus on welfare dependency among immigrants is closely tied to the current socio-economic landscape in the United States. In recent years, U.S. social welfare expenditure has continued to increase, putting significant pressure on government finances. Against this backdrop, the current administration aims to alleviate fiscal burdens by restricting the entry of immigrants who may rely on welfare, while simultaneously securing more resources for U.S. citizens. From a governance perspective, this policy may be somewhat rational. However, when viewed through a humanitarian lens, it undeniably disregards the fundamental rights and emotional needs of immigrant families. Furthermore, we must remain vigilant against the potential chain reaction that could be triggered by this policy adjustment. On the one hand, families who have already submitted immigration applications may face prolonged waiting periods that disrupt their lives. This is particularly true for those who have resigned from jobs back home, sold their properties, and made extensive preparations to settle in the US and who are now in a difficult situation. On the other hand, such stringent immigration policies may also affect US diplomatic relations with relevant countries. After all, immigration is not just a domestic issue. It also involves personnel exchanges and friendly interactions between countries. Jamaican immigration applicants affected by this policy could consider planning alternative options beyond passive waiting. For example, they could apply for a non-immigrant visa to visit family in the US for a short time and gain first-hand knowledge of the local area. Alternatively, they could proactively research immigration policies in other countries to find more suitable options. Naturally, these options should be chosen carefully based on individual circumstances. It is advisable to consult a professional immigration lawyer before making final decisions to avoid unnecessary losses due to misunderstandings about policy. Additionally, domestic US public opinion warrants attention. Many American citizens and social organizations have already questioned the travel ban, arguing that it is too extreme and contradicts America's core value of multiculturalism. If this opposition gains sufficient momentum, it could influence policy adjustments. However, given the current landscape, the Trump administration's stance on immigration policy is exceptionally firm, so changes are unlikely. The progress of Jamaican Foreign Minister Kamina Johnson-Smith's communications also warrants close attention. If she can secure clear policy interpretations from relevant US agencies, such as the specific scope of the suspension order, potential exceptions, and possible conditions for its future lifting, it could provide affected groups with clear guidance on how to proceed. Nevertheless, we must prepare ourselves mentally for the fact that the US government rarely alters established decisions under pressure from other nations. I'd now like to address our Jamaican friends. Awaiting immigration approvals. Though the current situation is challenging, please don't lose hope. Easily, during this waiting period, stay informed about the latest policy developments and strengthen your connections with others in a similar situation by sharing information and experiences. At the same time, prepare for the worst-case scenario by proactively planning your personal and professional arrangements so that you are not caught off guard by policy uncertainties. This predicament affects not only Jamaica, but all nations included in the 75-country blacklist. Countless families are facing the abrupt suspension of their dreams of reunification, and countless individuals are seeing their life plans completely disrupted. Such shifts in personal destiny triggered by national policy adjustments are undeniably frustrating. However, we must recognize that in the era of globalization, immigration policies are never static. They evolve alongside shifts in a nation's social, economic, and political landscapes beyond. Adapting to policy changes, it is paramount for applicants to maintain rationality and composure never allowing temporary setbacks to derail their progress. At this point, many viewers may be wondering, how long will this suspension last? Months? Years? Or could it become permanent? In truth, no one can provide a definitive answer, as it depends on the US government's assessment of immigration welfare, dependency rates, and the future trajectory of the nation's socio-economic landscape. If the US fiscal situation improves, or the government revises its evaluation criteria for immigration welfare dependency, the suspension order may be lifted. However, if the administration maintains its current direction of travel on immigration policy, this suspension could persist for an extended period. Additionally, historical precedents offer valuable context. Previously, the US has implemented similar immigration restrictions, yet most policies never truly became indefinite. Instead, they were adjusted based on evolving circumstances. For example, some measures were partially revised or entirely repealed after implementation due to widespread public controversy or failure to achieve the intended outcomes. Therefore, there is no need to be overly pessimistic about this suspension order. It may be lifted at some future point. Regardless of future policy shifts, the most crucial step for current applicants is to focus on planning for the present. If your application is frozen, use this time to organize your life and career strategically. Consider developing your professional skills to prepare for future opportunities. Whether you are pursuing a career in the US or remaining in your home country, alternatively, you could dedicate more time to family and reconnect with loved ones you may have neglected during the immigration process. After all, immigration isn't the only path in life. No matter your circumstances, maintaining a positive and optimistic mindset will help you find a suitable path forward. Finally, I'd like to hear your thoughts. Do you think that the US's decision to suspend visas for 75 countries is justified? What viable alternatives are there for affected Jamaican families? If you were in a similar situation and had to wait indefinitely, would you persevere or abandon your plans to immigrate to the US? Please share your thoughts and insights in the comments section below. Let's discuss this together. To keep you updated on the latest developments regarding this suspension order, I will continue to monitor announcements from the Jamaican government and relevant US agencies. As soon as new information becomes available, I will create a video to share it with you. Therefore, if you haven't subscribed yet, please click the subscribe button now to avoid missing crucial policy updates. Also, please share this video with friends who may find it useful so that more affected individuals can access this information. That concludes today's video. I wish every family awaiting reunion the best of luck, and I hope that everyone striving for their dreams is met with kindness by the world. See you in the next video.